Yakima Consortium. And so Provost Chilton, I understand that you and Spokane Chancellor Darrell DeWald will speak to this. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So I will kick it off, and then of course, Vice President DeWald, if you have thoughts to add, or if there are questions that are better answered by you, please take the microphone. But in your packet, you will see that there is a proposal for an action item to establish or designate our Yakima location as a WSU consortium site. And this proposal, the full proposal is in your packet. It was supported by the Faculty Senate Executive Committee. And beyond what it says in your packet, one of the things that I wanted to point out is that there are clear guidelines from the U.S. Department of Education in terms of the 3 types of educational locations for higher education. There is an instructional site, a consortium, and a campus. And as you all know, we have 6 campuses and we have many, many instructional sites. But in looking at the activities that are currently happening at Yakima, it's clear that the most appropriate designation for what is currently happening is as a consortium. And I will not read you the full guidelines, but I'll give a couple of examples. For a consortium, it typically exists to enable an institution to offer a degree that it alone cannot fully provide, meaning that it often includes collaborations with other entities, which this does. In terms of administration, the consortium has on-site administration that works in collaboration with consortium partners. The budget can be either managed on-site or off-site. If it were a full campus, then the budget would need to be fully managed locally. It does require that we're resourcing the institution appropriately to the activities there, and also indicates that consortium partners collaborate to provide extended academic services and essential support services on site. So it really clarifies what our responsibilities are. It better describes what is actively happening there already. Other than that, the specific details are in the packet. And Darrell, I would just ask if you would like to add anything to my overview.
No, I think that was very clear. As President Schultz has pointed out in the past, and I've asked the Executive Vice Chancellor, Dr. Celestina Barbosa Leiker to join, because we are working toward expansion of the collaboration in our consortium efforts there, if approved, consortium. But I think that's clear in terms of the operation as it is and what we're asking.
Okay, are there any questions?
And I can go ahead and go through the presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you would like.
Okay.
This will maybe bring you up to speed. But
Yeah.
So,
That would be great.
So
Yeah.
Stina, would you please join me
Sure.
in case folks have questions? So we'll go through this because some of you have already seen part of this. We will not belabor the points, but maybe highlight them for you.
May I interrupt for just a second?
Please do.
Just to clarify on what Elizabeth was saying, it wasn't just the Faculty Senate Executive Committee that approved this. This is the entire Faculty Senate that voted on this and approved it by a super majority. So
I apologize.
no, that's okay. I just
Yeah.
wanted them to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then if I could just to say something. So somebody asked me earlier today, May 5th is a celebratory day in many ways, but it's also our National Day of Awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And so this is what we talked about as a land grant institution committed to the service to all of our citizens. I just wanted to point that out. So thank you for the opportunity. We'll go through a brief presentation called Yakima Opportunities. So Yakima, the municipality is approximately 94,000 people. The county is approximately 250,000 people. It's largely rural. Approximately 50% of the population is Latinx Hispanic. So The communities in need, Yakima and Eastern Washington, you'll note that there's a lower educational attainment, higher unemployment, increased poverty, and higher rates of being uninsured. And it is among the 14 counties in our state that are considered medically underserved. So there's a shortage of primary care health providers, and that ranges from the physicians in place, but it also encompasses nurses and pharmacists. So you will note that out of the 39 counties, Yakima County ranks 34th in overall health and outcomes and 36 in terms of the health factors. So it is a county and a municipality in need. We have had a long-term presence there in Yakima. Our nursing program was affiliated with Yakima Valley Community College for about 25 years. Our pharmacy program has been in place for about 25 years as well, but they didn't have affiliation necessarily at one site. About 8 years ago, pharmacy established a partnership with Pacific Northwest University of Health Sciences, an organization that offers a doctor of osteopathic medicine. They're working toward the delivery of occupational therapy and physical therapy. PNWU works closely with WSU, and we are actually branded, co-branded on the entryway into their campus with our nursing and pharmacy, because now, as of about 4 years ago, we have nursing on the campus as well. These are fairly new facilities. What we are seeking to achieve is a partnership that serves locally and regionally to recruit, educate, and return students in this area. The example you see on the left-hand side of the slide is an example of a pharmacy student who is a PharmD, who is in fact a prime example of one of the successes. And I'll go ahead and talk about our programs.
Daryl, can I just ask a quick question?
Please.
I'm sorry that I'm not better, but can you describe to me osteopath? Like, what are some of the things, the lanes that they are really drilling into in PNW versus your more traditional medical education?
Sure.
programming?
And what I'll do is give a brief description and then ask questions.
Okay.
Osteopathic medicine is generally more holistic of
Okay.
the body and the spirit of the individual. So it's a more holistic approach to medicine.
Okay.
But my belief is that allopathic medicine, MDs, and osteopathic medicines, both in their training, which is almost identical in terms of the required didactic training for the first 2 years, and the way that allopathic medicine is now becoming more and more holistic.
Mhm.
Osteopathic medicine has been largely focused on primary care. So they have a strong representation in family medicine and internal medicine, and to a lesser degree in psych and other primary care, where allopathic physicians, and like our allopathic school, we also, because we're community-based, we have a commitment to primary care. So there isn't a dissimilar kind of a vision for what our students will do.
Okay. That's
So,
helpful. Thank you.
yeah, there are also naturopathic physician paths,
Right, yeah.
and they are even different.
Okay.
Yes.
That helps.
So when we have a residency program, and this happened in the last couple of years, there are no longer residency programs for MD students and DO students. There are now just residency programs, and the residency programs, even on our campus, accept approximately 40 to 50% DO physicians, as well as the MD physicians. So in Yakima, this number of students is down in the last 2 years, but we had a high point, kind of a high water mark of about 235 students, with a focus on the Bachelor of Science in Nursing and the PharmD program. As I've mentioned to some in the past, our pharmacy program was of a size and capacity that in Yakima, it rivaled some of the other pharmacy programs across our nation. It was that size. It's a high quality program, that emanates from Spokane, but also has a second really important node in Yakima. So the vision for Yakima is that it would be, it's ideally positioned to serve as a hub in parts of central Washington. I'll address this. This is an overstatement, but it gives you a sense of what we were thinking. We also view it as a hub and a catalyst for optimized access to quality healthcare for medically underserved. We also view this as an opportunity to more geographically connect with our Tri-Cities campus, which is a leader in the nursing. We are considering, just to say, that pharmacy would also be cited. I think that the chancellor is working with the team, and we would like to, Chancellor Haynes, I think, would like to see pharmacy also in the Tri-Cities area, but this could be a connection and a collaboration, but another node in our system. So what we are seeking is to provide quality care for those who are underserved in our state. So we are not only trying to educate and train, but our students out in those environments actually provide, in part, higher quality care. And the WSU nurses and the WSU pharmacists in the Yakima County and in Yakima are viewed very positively by the municipality. The municipality is actually the one that came forward to ask that WSU have presence there some nearly 3 decades ago. So here are some of the opportunities. I've already mentioned this, but workforce development, collaboration with other organizations. PNWU has now been an accredited university for several years, including they have NWCCU accreditation. So they have accreditation for their osteopathic medicine program, but they have sought and gained early accreditation with NWCCU. The partnerships with PNWU, for them, they provide a great opportunity to do interprofessional education. For us, they see us as a R1 institution where we can work with them to provide not only some of the wraparound services to complete good research, including IRBs and support systems, but we are already in the process of writing proposals with them to be submitted. So their faculty would like to have access and opportunity to work with our faculty. And Dr. Barbosa-Leiker is working on that in real time.
And our faculty are excited to work with their faculty as well there because of the population that's there and really engaged in community participatory research.
Excellent. What we also see is an opportunity to help a partner institution, Central Washington University, which has had some challenges, but they have programs in health sciences. In addition, Heritage, which is a native serving organization on native lands. And Heritage is a partner. We lead a program. Dr. Angela Stewart, who is a pharmacist, leads a program that is the Yakima Valley Interprofessional Education Consortium. And Dean Lead and others have been heavily involved in this. So we are also considering new degree opportunities there, and that we have some degrees that could in fact be delivered, and we are hoping to partner with Global on some of that. In addition, we're looking at initiatives that have been started around social work or public health that would be, these would be good in Central Washington, some of which would be located out of the Tri-Cities campus, but would be an easy and good fit for the Yakima area. So we also have a large and growing rural health initiative that is coming out of our College of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences. And this has been funded in part by a large donation from a WSU donor that we're really excited about, over $2 million from an anonymous donor for a rural health initiative led in to a large degree by the College of Pharmacy. Below, you'll see just the interprofessional education. Another consideration is that we could establish a partnership or as a sponsor residency programs over the long term. And what I would say is we do focus on and have in mind the enhanced collaborations with our Tri-Cities colleagues. So what are the next steps? For us, it is to go through the process of approval by faculty senate and then by the Regents for a consortium site, and then to just formalize that sustained budget to address the student needs. And we are doing that. We will provide more student services in the short term, and the consortium site catalyzes us doing that in a more tangible way. And then we are looking at not only putting additional leadership in place, we will not have a chancellor there because it's a consortium site, but we would have additional leadership both in nursing to mimic what we have right now in pharmacy, probably an associate dean level leader. That we are seeking just the Regents' approval for Yakima to be considered not an instructional site, but a consortium site. So please feel free to ask any questions. That's a kind of a brisk walkthrough, but of Provost Chilton, Dr. Bobert-Silliker, myself.
Just a procedural piece of information. If the Board of Regents approves the designation of the Yakima instructional site as a consortium, then we would submit it as a proposal to our accrediting body, the NWCCU. And since they accredit PNWU, we don't believe it'll take very long, but they don't actually give us the timeline. They don't say you'll hear in next week, but just to acknowledge there is this one last step. But the first step would be to receive Board of Regents.
And then if I could just follow up for some that don't know, one thing that we're excited about that Regent Dickinson was asking about. So I was made aware that 14 of our WSU students will be entering the osteopathic program in the fall. That represents the fact that we've had a long-standing relationship with them, and 65 of our alums are either in process or completed their osteopathic training there to go on and be predominantly primary care physicians.
So if you are a student entering into the osteopathic pathway, where are you coming out of as an undergraduate? Like how does that work? Are you applying to go there like you would apply to WSU's medical school? And if you are accepted, are you coming out of biology? And what is the pathway for a student?
I would say almost identical.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So it's yet another option for students pursuing health medical education. This is yet another option that we have in our state.
Yes. Yes.
Very complimentary. The training is very complimentary.
Yeah. What would you, Dr. Barbosa, what would you say from your kind of research and the work you do across the state on behalf of WSU, your assessment of what is perhaps the greatest need of the students in Yakima?
Well, the greatest need, I think, is going to be the support that we offer them. We have the majority of the students there coming from the community, which is fantastic and amazing because it presents additional opportunities for students that maybe English is not their first language, it's a second or third language. And so while we need the commitment on behalf of the university to support those students to make sure that they're getting stellar WSU education, we're able to retain and graduate them. How amazing that in our state, we will have a majority of healthcare professionals coming from that campus that speak the language of the people that they're trying to serve. And so the access to healthcare utilization, which we're trying to solve across the nation, we will have a direct hand in that in our state.
Maybe if you would speak a little bit to, we work pretty closely with a lot of the tribal nations, and does that also represent opportunity there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you asked really specifically about research as well. And they have strong connections into the community. Of course, they've been there for a long time. They love having WSU presence already there. It's known in the community there. They see that as a really great opportunity for their community. They know that they'll be getting nurses and pharmacists in their community. We're already seen as just this really great partner. For researchers, though, coming from the other campuses, since there isn't a strong WSU research, there aren't full professors with, a whole lot going on. There is a lot going on, but there's additional opportunities for health-related research and health disparities. But I've also chatted with folks in vet med and agriculture that are like, oh my gosh, if that was an opportunity for us, we could set up shop there and study agriculture there in a much more large animal, and other opportunities. So there's a lot.
Thank you for the comprehensive kind of overview. It helps.
I'm sorry it was so quick, but thank you for the opportunity to address us in your consideration.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next section are future action items that we need to discuss. And the first is establishment of the Master of Healthcare Administration and Leadership. Provost Chilton.
Yes, and Chancellor Dave Saleh is here if there are any questions beyond what might be in the packet here, but this was initiated by the Elson S. Boyd College of Medicine to establish a master degree of healthcare administration and leadership that would be offered through the global campus. Originally, if you read through all the details, we were going to take an existing degree and change it into what the needs to fit needs, but it was enough of a change that the recommendation was that we really just established a new degree. So Daryl, you may also have some background on this from the College of Medicine perspective. The Faculty Senate approved the proposal, and we also shared this with the chancellors on the campuses just to make sure they were aware and didn't have any questions or concerns they wanted to raise. Daryl, did you want to give a little more background?
I would only say it's a program that seems to have a lot of interest. I think we're going to see it grow over time. So I'm really encouraged that it's moving forward. I think it is really well put together because it is our College of Business, it's our College of Medicine, but it's not only that, they have embraced the other health sciences colleges, and I think it's going to expand beyond that. So I think this is something that will help our brand in the space of health sciences quite a bit. So I'm encouraged by it.
To speak to just why through the global campus, the reach.
Yeah, we were able to get where we want to go. And as Daryl said, we did a market analysis and the needs, it's going to be a success. The other thing about the program that it's our first degree program where we incorporate stackable credentials so that you can complete part of that master's degree and you have a credential that you can take into the career. And then two more credentials and you have your master's degree. So it's novel in that sense.
Dave, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
So my perception is that it's sort of like the equivalent MBA to be applied in the healthcare arena.
We could say that. I don't know if Chip would agree with that.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, in terms of just the demand, see the demand coming from the business arena or from the health educated.
More so on the health side, for sure.
Yeah, I had opportunity to serve on the Pullman Regional Hospital CEO Search Committee. And I would say the vast majority of applicants had this type of credential as part of their portfolio. And you see this, that they move up, they're spread out through health systems and they have this type of education and background. So it seems to be becoming more of an expectation that whether you have a different type of degree that you also have gone through this type of a program.
We hear also from our clinical advisory board. So our local clinical partners are asking for this type of training and education of our students, that this is where healthcare is going.
And this will be essentially budget neutral.
Yes, well, the proposal does have a budget, is the anticipated new tuition. The idea is that it would certainly cover the cost.
Yeah.
Our new budget model will help make sure that we're tracking the revenues that come in with the associated costs. But yes, that is there's no request for investment for this.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's go and talk about the discontinuation of the Master of Education and Educational Psychology. Yeah, Provost Chilton.
So this one's even easier. The educational psychology program developed a master's non-thesis degree to better meet the needs and industry standards for WSU students. So the new degree has been approved, and all the students who are in that program have actually switched over into the new degree program. So the Master of Education degree in educational psychology has 0 students in it and has effectively been replaced. So this is to shut down a degree that essentially doesn't exist.
Okay, any questions there? Okay, so for the committee, with your consent, we can put, because neither one of these is a controversial issue, we can actually move, actually include these 2 items into the consent agenda tomorrow, unless there's any objections. So anybody have concerns about doing that?
Dave's got a big objection.
No, just use unanimous consent and move on.
Yeah. Okay, so we will do that tomorrow. Okay, so now we've got a couple of information items, and the first of which are items approved under delegated authority. Again, Provost Chilton.
Yeah, so we have 3 changes to the 3 categories of changes to the faculty manual, again, which are in your packet. You have both redlined versions as well as the clean versions. These were submitted to Kirk for consideration and are typically approved under delegated authority. So these are informational items. The faculty manual, though, is the oversight for that is the Faculty Affairs Committee of the Faculty Senate. So, of course, we work closely with them. First, the major change to the first section in terms of investigation of complaint, we basically added language that said if a thorough review, if there's a complaint about a faculty member, if a previous thorough review had been conducted, like the Center for the CCR, or there had been a research misconduct previously, if a full investigation has already been conducted, that the provost's office wouldn't have to conduct another independent investigation of the same charge in the same matter. We had a couple of cases where, based on the activity, it could fall under 2 separate offices to investigate, which seems not very efficient to have 2 offices investigating the same complaint. And so the faculty manual allows for, if a complaint comes to the provost's office, if there has already been a previous investigation that is from an internal official unit within the university, that can be used in lieu of doing a new investigation. So the exact wording of that, which I'm saying not very articulately, but that's essentially the crux of those changes to the first section. The second section just clarifies the wording about emeritus appointments and also removes all gendered language in there to include, things like broken links were in there, updated titles. It's a little bit more of a housekeeping. But the removal of the gendered language is consistent with, nationally what we're looking at for emeritus appointments, for example. Although, this is one of my pet peeves. Kirk's going to laugh at me because he knows how I love to edit things. But if you're going to be a professor emerita, you should have to be a professora emerita, because anyway. Right? Am I right? Professor emerita. Yeah, anyway. But
I skipped those classes.
yeah. Semantics, but it does give the indication so that faculty can choose their preferred pronoun in their emeritus status. those are three sections of, any questions about those changes?
Okay, hearing none. We will move forward to our next information item, which is research metrics update, and that will be Provost Chilton and Vice President for Research, Chris King.
So we do have.
There you go.
Magically appear.
Chris, do you want to join me?
Yeah.
Tag team a little bit?
I don't know if So, we had a discussion with Regent Powell and, about what would be useful for this committee to chew on a little bit, other than all those very exciting matters that we've just discussed. I think Yakima was certainly the highlight of the previous subject, but what are some of the things that our regents might want to have an update on with regards to research and academic affairs? And so Laura had suggested that we talk a little bit about how we track ourselves in terms of our research productivity and with respect to peers. And so Chris and I had suggested that we talk a little bit about the NSF herd study. You've all seen academic analytics, and that's obviously one way we can compare our departments, our schools, and our university. But another way that we can compare ourselves nationally to peers, particularly with respect to sponsored research, is the National Science Foundation Higher Education Research and Development, or herd study. And so NSF asks institutions every year to report to them. Obviously, they already know about our federal funding, but they also ask us to report public information about state and local government funding. Also, what our institutional support of research is: faculty startup, sabbatical salaries, research infrastructure. That's self-reported data. And then data that we might receive from business and industry, as well as nonprofits, for example, foundations. And so every year institutions report this. And just keep in mind that the last three bullets are self-reported data, and so are not necessarily public information and things that we could get in, say, academic analytics or through other kind of public sources. So keeping that in mind, that the data I'm going to show you include a lot of self-reported data other than the federal funding, of course. So Chris and I put together this chart to show you where Washington State University sits with respect to total research expenditures. So this includes all of the categories that I previously mentioned: federal, state, local, nonprofit, institutional funds, all of it. And if you look all the way over on the right is 2020, they lag a year, so we'll soon hear about 2021. You can see that over time, from 2016 to 2020, we've certainly gone up. There was a little bit up and down there, and Chris will talk in a minute about some of the data. You've heard about it before. But we looked at our ranking compared to all institutions who reported. Remember off the top of your head, Chris, this is like 640 colleges and universities across the United States. And this includes Harvard, Yale, and large privates, includes other larger public university systems. This is not shabby at all to be in this group. And this group is our system plan peers. So we're comparing ourselves to our peers here to give you a sense. Now, this ranking of 76 over this past 5-year period has not changed very much. So even though the total dollars have gone up, and Chris will talk about that in the middle, our ranking has hovered around 76 among the same peer group. And so, I would say Chris and I would love to get together and say, let's dig in deeper. Let's look at federal funding, institutional funding, foundation funding, and where can we lean in more and get that number up, and where do we want to aspire to be You all remember from the academic analytics presentation that we're also smaller than, I think, all of these institutions in terms of numbers of faculty. And so, punching above our weight is a familiar, maybe that should be our tagline.
Right.
Yeah, that's our new brand.
There you
go.
There you go, Bill.
Exactly.
Not easy.
So, that's a data point that we can look at and we can dig into more heavily. And then we just looked at federal R&D expenditures, and this is not self-reported. This comes directly from the feds, and NSF has their handle on that. So we know that this is super accurate. And just as a parenthesis, the reason I put an asterisk next to institutional funds, there was, back when I was at a previous institution, we were looking at this for ourselves, and we saw that Harvard had reported 0 institutional funds to contribute to research. Now we know that that's not true. And so our research office associate VP called over there to a colleague and said, "Why did you report 0?" And they're like, "Oh, there's so much of the other stuff. We didn't really see the need to report institutional funds." So it's a little like hubris. But the point is that if you dug into institutional funds, you would see some universities include sabbatical salaries, some do not. There are guidelines, but it's fairly loose, and sometimes institutions overinflate the amount of institutional funds, I would say, or let's just say err on the side of inclusion, and some are more conservative. I think we're pretty in the middle of the road, because the thing is, you don't want to exaggerate the amount of state dollars that you're putting into research, right? We're a research institution, but of course, our primary mission is the education of our students in the state of Washington. So if you look at federal R&D, this is a number that is auditable, and you can see that we have increased by 20 million over those 5 years. Again, though, our rank has hovered at about the same place in that same time, goes up and down by 1 or 2 points. So even though the dollars can go up, because everyone else's dollars are going up, and this is their actual expenditures, not their awards, but their expenditures, what it means is that we need to keep growing even just to stay in the same place. So Chris, I'm going to let you talk about this next slide, where this actually shows you the mix of research expenditure funds over a much longer period.
Okay, great. Thanks, Elizabeth. Just one comment, I think on the previous slide, I think you've heard this before, but just to say it again, with 900 odd tenure track faculty, dividing 350 million by 900 faculty is, about 350K per faculty member in terms of expenditures. That is near the top of that peer set. I think, as I recall, I think Purdue's actually 260 or whatnot. So actually, the faculty are doing fantastic here, right? So kudos to them and all the staff that make it happen.
Punching above our weight.
Punching above our weight, yeah. So thanks, Elizabeth, for the intro. So this chart, the first thing I'd point out that this chart has 2021 on it. The others didn't, because that's been, as Elizabeth, that's been reported to NSF, but it won't come out officially till the fall, right? Since we reported it, though we know it, so I'm putting it up here so that you can see it. Just on the numbers, the good news there is you can see it's about 20 odd million. Which is nice. That's good. These things change, so we always just try and keep a steady mindset about it. We've discussed this in some of our previous meetings. That reflects a number of things, among some success on large awards, and so on. Just a little bit of a peek, and just a little more detail on what's coming up on that. But so in our federal awards went up significantly. You can see in the chart there, 2021. A lot of people participated. The faculty, Colleen's group obviously plays a big role in that. And in 2022 to date, actually, is probably 30 million ahead of 2021, and that represents largely large awards. So we would hope to see the expenditure number be on a continued good track, but we'll see, because funny things happen with that. I mean, for example, during the pandemic, we actually had a real issue in certain colleges like engineering, because they actually couldn't spend because people weren't in the lab. right? And so we definitely, well, actually, you can see 2020 dipped a bit there, but there's a lot of factors that go into this. And, you know, to your point, Elizabeth, you could spend a lot of time taking apart these numbers, but, you know, it's, we actually have, you know, we have a little analytics group in our group of sort of one person, half a person that does that. We also work with the provost office in the college and trying to continue learning what we can, you know, from the data. I think Elizabeth made an important point. Our internal number, which is the institutional number, which is in blue, is about average. Just, you know, Harvard is 0. To give you an example on the other side, ASU, if I recall correctly, is over 40% institutional. So this is a university that turbocharges institutional investment internally. I mean, that's their brand, right? And their total is 650 or so, 650. But they, so anyway, so that there's enormous variation in that number. I actually call that number sort of the wild west of research expenditures, because there's basically no oversight of it, because I guess it's hard to figure out. So, yeah.
And these are state appropriated funds, or, I mean,
Yeah,
where are they coming from?
Well, for ASU, I believe a lot of it is F&A.
Okay.
So I think they've historically plowed a lot of their F&A back straight into research. So, but that's good, except there's a lot of indirect costs that have to be covered. So I'm not quite sure how to do that.
And for
But-
other universities, I mean, when I was at a previous institution, we had very high institutional support for research expenditures, and a conservative publication called us out, saying that this is where your tax dollars are going to fund faculty members, you know, pet research projects. You know, the headline was really bad because institutional report number was so high that it basically looked like state dollars were, you know, going primarily research and not to educational mission. And so, you know, some do inflate those numbers because it affects your rankings. The more dollars you can say you spend on research, the higher your rankings, but then where is the funding coming from? So that you wouldn't see in the Herd study, right? You see institutional support, but you don't know how they're funding it.
Another comment just on this slide, you know, I think actually it's given that we were in the pandemic a lot during 2021, it's impressive that the expenditure number went up significantly.
Yeah,
So
right.
even compared to 2019.
Yeah.
Are there a couple of big awards or big expenditures on awards that are in there?
Yeah, that's what I think is driving.
Yeah.
It's a couple of the larger ones. Although some of them actually hadn't hit in FY21 very much, actually. So there'll be more. That's why 22 is, near as we can tell, still somewhat ahead of 21. Let's see. I think one other thing, just to connect with things we discussed before. So you may remember in a previous meeting we talked about how we had to make some accounting changes in the WSU foundation numbers because they've been over counting. It's a long story. It had to do with old systems. So the point is, this chart is actually correct. Okay, back as early as 2010, and we submitted corrected data to NSF, but they actually won't accept it before it was before 2017. Okay, so not that you're.
So there is that big jump.
Yeah,
from
well, so this is
2016.
accurate what you're saying, but you know, I guess the point is for those of you that actually stayed in, you know, trolling the NSF websites.
Don't go back before.
The data is
2017.
not accurate. I will say though, just one thing which is interesting. You read a lot in, you know, in the press and so on about U.S. innovation and how we're doing with respect to spending and industrial research and our competitive position. A lot of the data for that comes from these NSF databases. It's not just used for this. It's used very broadly to look. I mean, that's really the main charge of the higher education data center at NSF, is to keep track of innovation for the country. And so there's a whole lot more data in there, and you can take this apart and look at a whole bunch of different things.
You know, one of the things that one can do now, they do have a query tool, which is only a couple of years old, where you could go in and say, can you compare us to other public, you could choose what your comparison peers are. You can choose whether or not who you're comparing yourself to has a medical school or not, which makes a big difference in the suite of funding and the total dollars. So you can do some tracking, but so it is fun to play. I'm the kind of
Yeah,
person who would
right.
play with it except for data.
Yeah.
So, if I could comment, I
Yeah.
think what I'm hearing you say with this particular data set, a ranking of 76 out of 646 is a strong position. We've got quantity, we have productivity, certainly. The aspect of quality and how that shows up in academic excellence would be just like icing on the cake, right? And the data this morning around the scholars and the scholarships as an outcome of this research, it seems like there's another communication opportunity that elevates the prominence and position of WSU overall.
Well, you make a really good point, which is that, for those federal and even state awards, but I know the federal process a little better, because there is a very rigorous peer review process that's associated with those. When you're awarded one of those federal grants, it's not just dollars that come into the university, it's recognition for the quality of scholarship that it's funding. This is one of the reasons why we want to have good external sponsored research, because it does provide that peer review process. I mean, it's extremely rigorous. I had applied 7 times before I got my first NSF grant. And I just kept revising and resubmit. And that at the time was approximately 1 out of 7 proposals were funded. And it takes a lot of work to put the proposal together. And then you have not only a panel, but external expert reviews. So I think that's a really good point that you're making. That part of our story is the more we can bring those research expenditures up, the more we're actually demonstrating the quality of the scholarship.
Yeah. So to that correlation, I mean, my operational observation is we always look at volume, right? We always look at productivity, but the quality is so germane to the reputation of the
And
school
storytelling.
and the storytelling. It's such a strong story. It just doesn't jump out if you don't know the rigor of the peer review.
Well, it's the rigor of the peer review, but it's also per number of faculty. Because when you look at, our productivity as per faculty member, I mean, it really jumps us up. So
Yeah, I love the way that you broke that down, Chris.
Yeah.
That's meaningful.
Yeah, just divide by about 1,000
Uh-huh.
faculty and.
It just gives you a lot more
350K
insight to
is quite a bit
understanding.
above, yeah, it's at the top.
So
I'm just gonna say for Regent Ramos, the talk, Elizabeth, you gave at the last meeting with the AA and the measures of awards, publications, citations by departments, so we can act with that tool now. Thank you. We can aggregate that by department, by college, and get a better read on the quality
Yeah.
and the relative quality.
Well, I just have to mind map it in my head. The system is, the outcomes are showing up in different spaces, so. Cool.
I have just one last slide and then be happy to open it up. One of the other things that the National Science Foundation collects is data on doctorates awarded. These do not include professional degrees. These are only doctorates, PhDs, research doctorates. And this is considered a measure of your research impact because, of course, our doctoral students go out and have great impacts in the world. And also they are part and parcel of the research mission. We would be able to conduct the research that we're awarded without doctoral students in many of these fields. And so we sit there, somewhat in the middle, especially if you exclude Purdue, which is, doesn't Purdue have almost 3 times the number of faculty? They're significantly larger than we are. So again, this is a reflection of size in part, for our size, that is a respectable number. We are in the process of internally searching for a vice provost for graduate and professional education, and one to replace Lisa Gloss, who's stepping down as dean of the graduate school. And I just interviewed the 2 finalists this week, and one of the things I talked to each of them about is digging into this a little bit. Size can matter in certain programs, but not all doctoral programs need to grow. Doctoral students are expensive, both in actual dollars and in faculty time. And so we want to make sure we understand where is their need for doctorates out in the world, where is their demand, where is their opportunity to expand based on the faculty and the departments currently, and really be more strategic about where we're applying resources to grow, which campuses, which colleges, which departments, rather than just saying, I have been at institutions who just said, oh, we just want to get that number up, right? Again, to your point, quantitative. We want that to be 500 without really saying, well, do we need 500 more PhDs in anthropology? Probably not, but where is the need and how do we make sure the students we bring in are getting through, are funded while they're here and can go on and be successful? So I think that, I think the last thing is thank you.
Do we keep in touch with our PhDs to see what their productivity has been in the long term?
I don't know the answer to that. No, I don't think
Certainly
I know that certain colleges absolutely do and
Right.
certain departments do. And there are national clearinghouses, for example, I know that in the social sciences, you could look up Washington State University and get a sense of where people have gone. Often they look 10 years out because there could be a little bit of flux in those first years. But I do not believe that we are looking at our data czar over there. I do not believe we have that data at an institution. But
It'd be interesting to take a look at because that's sort of a measure of the quality and so forth as well.
Maybe just one more point. I mean, we've been talking about the numbers, but there is obviously a human side to all of this, right? I mean, the support required to do it. We've been talking about some of the differences in campuses in terms of, different, mixes of age and gender of the faculty. So, there's equity issues, right? And so it might be interesting to do a campus by campus dive on this as well as a unit by unit or college by college dive.
no question.
I'm sorry, I thought our alum were tracked in the analytics.
So they are, academic analytics has a module by which we can track not the undergraduates, but the master's, doctoral, those categories of students. We're actually right now investigating going into that. And it's it's data that's hard for the institution to do because it does take a lot of people power to get that data. So we're actually investigating being able to do that. It's not 100% perfect, but it definitely would help illuminate where they go, what they're doing, all of those kinds of data facts that are interested, that people are interested in.
Yeah, it's really useful. Often disciplinary national associations do this. So I saw this amazing survey done by the American Anthropological Association showing that, most are not with PhDs becoming faculty members or in higher ed. 75% of them went on and got a law degree or working in nonprofits, corporations, doing working for engineering firms, doing cultural resource management, whatever it is. And only about 25% go on in the academy. And so if you know that from your disciplinary perspective and you're training graduate students, you can train them for the broad variety of careers. We tend to think of doctorates as being really focused, and in some fields they are. But for fields where you know that your graduates may have a variety of options, it helps you refine the curriculum.
Other questions? Well, this is very interesting, and I look forward to hearing some more as you have a chance to sort of look at some of the data behind the numbers and hearing some more about this.
Well, thank you for the suggestion to give you an update.
One question, since we got a little bit of time, do we have many students who basically we have somebody who is basically the mentor at WSU, but they're actually working someplace else and their PhD is being supported by a national lab or something like that. And then they have basically a mentor there as well. Do we have many situations like that? Because that's how I went and got my PhD. And it was just an interesting, it sort of ebbed and flowed as to whether people think it's a good idea or not, but from the university's perspective.
Yeah.
Who?
So
You? So you did?
Well, I think it will depend on discipline. I think it will depend on the field of study, things like that. I have a PhD student right now. I'm her advisor. It's on a topic I know very little about, very clinical oriented, but one of the best labs in the nation is in Oregon, and she's right there. And so she has this great clinical expert that's there and will be collecting data in his lab. But I'm here to support her in the nursing PhD program. She's a student of color. She wanted a faculty member of color. That was really important for her retention here at WSU. And I think if we ever wanted to, we'd be successful at recruiting her as well. So she's really, really loves this university and wanted to make sure she had the opportunity through WSU, but has this great clinical partner in another state.
Yeah, I mean, one example, as you probably recall, what you were just talking about is our students that work with P&L. We now have 50 through that graduate program, and their theses are paid. Basically, they get, in the simplest picture, they get paid for after they pass their qualifying exam. And to Sel's Tina's point, I mean, I think at the level of collaboration, this is, yes, everywhere, right? Because so much of our work now is interdisciplinary, right? So even if your thesis, your advisor may be here, but you may be spending 6 months or a year at different institution working on some other piece of your thesis where you need some outside.
And we are exploring opportunities with other organizations to do just that, more formalized, where the students would actually be at those other organizations, some in state, some out of state. And then they would have mentors that would be in the WSU system. Folks are coming to us asking for us to consider that, require MOUs, and a little bit like the process that we went through with P&L. But there are opportunities out there, so I like the question.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, it works in some cases, but I mean, in my case, I was already signed up to go to graduate school, took a summer job, and then they asked if I wanted to do my PhD work there. So that worked, but I had an employee one time who was under a similar program, and it was like the person had been working on this PhD for 10 years. I finally just said, you really just got to get it done. So sometimes, it can cause things to lag. So it really needs to be, I think, managed and mentored effectively in order to work.
That's a great point. I mean, one of the things is slightly different world, in the world of commercialization, right? When we have a faculty member who's commercializing and something they try to involve a student in part-time, boy, they go through conflict of interest committee reviews and blah, blah, blah. Students are here to finish their degree, not so.
Right.
So that kind of thing has to be.
Regent Powell, I guess I have a question, maybe for later, but I had a chance to tour Shock Physics Institute. How cool is that?
That is.
And is that a story that's buried in our campus? Kind of back to, what programs like the Shock Physics Institute exist? Had it not been for that tour, I wouldn't have known that exist in our ecosystem that we could make more visible or lift up. In terms of academic excellence. And it might be good to just have an inventory in our head, like that index card to say, well, did you know, WSU Shock Physics Institute is another example of academic excellence, and also to celebrate our Regent faculty. I think that's what you call them. They're like the top. It would be so cool to have just their bios, the ones that are active, and all in the spirit of academic excellence. So that might be something for later to also to supplement the story.
Our Regents professors are spectacular, and they meet as a group regularly and advise me, and they probably advise you too on ways that we can better both promote and support the service.
I like your suggestion. I think, we can review it through this committee. But I think it's also, for some of these things, it's useful to have just even a set of talking points, because, we can all be ambassadors for WSU when we're out there, and to have just a few talking points on some of the highlights. We've had them sort of in the past, off and
Well,
on.
I think we've gotten really good at more around crisis communication, having talking points.
Right, but this is on the
But
positive,
yeah, that's the
proactive side.
proactive way.
We
Because
have
they are
some of this
helpful.
committees, Laura,
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
We have, but to have it sort of
Yeah.
like your index card,
Yeah.
Kind of a did you know type. index
Yes.
card, Yeah.
elevator talk
Right, right.
type of thing. And I think that would be a great idea.
Well, and to educate
Some of those
us,
highlights.
because I'm not sure, what you would consider par with that institute, so.
That's a world leader. We have some other activities that are definitely at the top of their show too. Yeah, so we could put that in faculty and institutes or research centers of research.
Anything else? Suggestions for future topics?
Thank you. very
Okay,
much.
thank you very much. This was great.
Thank you.
Okay, so this meeting has now concluded, and the Regents will be taking a brief break, and we will be back at 2:30 for the Finance and Compliance Committee meeting. The YouTube link for the remainder of the meetings can be found on the WSU Board of Regents website. Thank you.